Peace, love, joy. What's good, YouTube? It's Kareem back again with another video. Alright, so today we're going to get back into semen retention, sexual alchemy, from an occult standpoint, an esoteric understanding of semen retention, right? So, semen retention is basically the practice of one not releasing his seed, whether it's through masturbation or whether it's in sex, right? And now, we have to understand what semen retention was and what it has become. So what semen retention used to be was spiritual masters and practitioners taking the sexual energy and transmuting the energy up from their lower chakras, from the lower parts of their body. They took the sexual energy from the lower sex organs and they transmuted the rest of that energy throughout the rest of the body. Now, what semen retention has become is essentially one just retaining the seed and practicing celibacy, but not really transmuting the energy as much, because the esoteric understanding of this part has been lost, right? The sexual alchemy understanding of semen retention has been lost with the whole explosion of knowledge that has come since we've been coming out of the Kali Yuga, since we've been coming out of this dark age, right? So coming out of this dark age, a lot of people have a limited understanding of how spirituality works on a fundamental level that is not mainstream, right? We're talking about a transformative level. So in essence, yes, a lot of these topics have their basis in truth, but we have to really see, okay, what are these things doing for our transformation? So the practice of semen retention has been taught and pretty much preached in many different religions and many different practices. It's had its roots in Taoism, it's had its roots in Taoism, it's had its roots in Hinduism, Tantra, it's had its roots in Islam, Christianity, Judaism, you name it, right? Most of these practices generally talk about celibacy minus Tantra, most likely. Tantra did not really talk too much about celibacy, but it's one of the paths that you can take. And there's not really anything against it in Tantra, but in most practices, they have been for celibacy. And the reason for this is simply because of the fact that, at least for the man, when a man releases his seed in intercourse or through masturbation, the seed itself doesn't matter, but it's the life force that's within the seed. So the life force within a male seed is essentially what gives you that spiritual energy. It's what gives you that drive, that fire, right? This is why they say the Kundalini energy, it sleeps in the lower chakras. It sleeps in the root chakra and it's coiled up. And to awaken it, you have to raise it up from the ovaries or from the testicles, depending on which sex you are. You have to raise and transmute that energy up. And so Mantak Chia's book, he talks a lot about this, because a lot of people, they'll be practicing semen retention, but they'll leave that sexual energy inside the lower chakras because they'll be ignorant on exactly how transmuting the energy truly works. A lot of people seem to think that, okay, I have all this extra energy, now I'm just going to do a bunch of things, work out, work on my business, transmute the energy into other things, and just by doing things. And that's perfectly fine, but that's not necessarily esoterically moving the energy. That's not alchemically moving and transmuting that energy. See, we have to really understand that when it comes to sexual alchemy, this is a spiritual practice. So the reason why a lot of people end up with prostate issues, and the reason why modern science has no understanding of how to transmute this energy, simply because the West is not really caught up, right? So you'll see there's a lot of stories of monks and a lot of stories of priests who have prostate gland issues because they're not necessarily transmuting the energy properly. They're leaving it in a lower nature and they're using sheer willpower to fight against it, when you're supposed to be raising the energy. Now, with semen retention, you don't necessarily have to be celibate either. You can actually engage in sex but not release the seed, or you can have an orgasm on a higher level if you've learned how to transmute that energy up, from the lower chakras to the higher chakras. So that's exactly why in Mantak Chia's book, he talks a lot about how to do that. And there's certain exercises that you can use to do that. And actually, there's a lot of physical exercises you can do in general if you don't really want to get into meditative exercises, the ones demonstrated in Mantak Chia's book for male sexual energy. right? You can do Qigong, Tai Chi, anything that deals with moving your energy. Yoga is also another way to do it. Those are ways to take the energy from the lower chakras and move it to the higher chakras. Fighting sports is another thing that men can do, men and women can do to transmute that yang energy, the sexual energy, into the higher nature, right? Because you're focusing on moving that energy and dynamically, transmuting it somewhere else. You can also do this with working out as well, but when it comes to having a conscious control, right, there's a lot of things that we have to do and we have to recognize, right? So when it comes to the seed itself, right, ejaculation, it doesn't really matter nearly as much as getting into training your subconscious mind, training your body to not let the seed take the easiest way out. So when you're not really activated, right, when you have certain chakra meridians that aren't really activated, what happens is the reason why you orgasm only feels so good, with the lower nature, is simply because of the fact that the only way that it's escaping is through the penis, right? It's through the urethra, but it's not necessarily escaping or transmuting. It's not rising up the spine. It's not going up into the brain. So this is why you'll feel a lot of sexual energy, feel a lot of drive while you're having sex, but when you release it, you feel like you lost something. You feel, depending on who you are, you'll feel a little bit tired, a little bit more weakened, simply because of the fact that energy is actually meant to rise up. The life force energy. The semen doesn't necessarily matter, but the life force energy within the semen is meant to be transmuted. So Mantak Chia talks about how you can raise that sexual energy, the more that you do these exercises, you can raise that sexual energy automatically, so that your mind is subconsciously doing these things and taking a life force energy by itself. That's how you retain that life force energy. But simply just holding on to the seed without doing that, it's not really doing anything for you. That's why a lot of people feel like, okay, I didn't really get any benefits out of semen retention, and I personally wasn't getting benefits out of semen retention until I really figured out how to do this, right? And I don't necessarily practice semen retention all the time, but that's mainly because, obviously I engage with women. I have two different women, right? And in these engagements, obviously when you're doing this, you don't necessarily want to always be on semen retention because it can sometimes get in the way. But if you know how to transmute the energy, then things are happening on a different level for you, right? This is exactly why I recommend Mantak Chia's book, so that you can learn how to do this on your own. And really, honestly, when it comes to understanding, that how your own energy works, you really want to get a feel for it, because everybody's different, right? And you're gonna find a different truth. So I don't even necessarily agree with everything he says in his book either, and you might necessarily agree with everything that I say or everything that he says, but there's still wisdom to be gained, just from learning how to transmute the energy, right? And so that's essentially the key, right, when it comes to semen retention. And personally, in my observations, I felt when I wasn't transmuting the energy properly, I did feel like an energy loss, especially before I was practicing NoFap, right? It definitely after every ejaculation, I didn't feel exactly as energized as before I did it. And then when I started practicing NoFap and semen retention together, I started to feel a very large increase, and it can be different from person to person, and really you want to have discipline, right? And you want to have an understanding. You want to see how this works. So from an occult standpoint, we have to just recognize exactly things from an energy type of standpoint. We have to see, okay, how can we raise this energy? How can we transmute it and use it for spiritual enlightenment? Because that's essentially what you're doing with it. When you store that energy, that Kundalini energy, when you store it into the brain, which is, that's the destination. You raise it all the way up to the brain, and you store it in the higher chakras. When you store it in the higher chakras, you can save that energy for creativity. You can save it for all different types of things and hold on to it so that you can use it for your own benefit, rather than you just letting it go all the time. And for me, I've seen a lot of benefits just off of doing the exercises myself. So that's why I highly recommend you get his book, Taoist Secrets of Love, Cultivating Male Sexual Energy. So I'm actually going to get into, some of the notes or some of the highlights that I've seen in this book that I feel might help this video, right? So in Mantak Chia's book, he says, Conservation of sexual energy is the first principle of cultivation. Ejaculation of the male seed for purposes other than having children is a wasteful loss of an extremely precious treasure. The energy lost over long periods of time weakens the physical health of the male and can lead to unconscious emotional anger towards women and gradually robs the male higher mind spirit of its power to rejuvenate itself. For this reason, many traditional spiritual orders in the world require male celibacy. Taoists accept sexual love as natural and healthy, but know that the momentary pleasure of genital orgasm when love is enjoyed without the loss of the powerful male seed, it's every man's birthright to have full control over his bodily functions to prevent this loss. The secret Taoist methods of sealing the penis in order to conserve Qing are given in chapters 5 through 8. So here Mantak Chia is basically saying that when it comes to the male sexual energy, every time you ejaculate and you don't retain the life force, you're wasting your spiritual energy. And this also has its foundation in science too, because obviously, when a man does ejaculate, he's not really producing nearly as much testosterone. He's actually losing things. And in essence, obviously the more that you release that energy, basically, you begin to kind of get used to it. And then eventually, if you're not really transmuting the energy, you're not really going to be having sex on a higher level. You'll just be having sex on a lower level. So, and another thing he says is that you need to avoid sex without love because it creates an imbalance in your physical, mental, and spiritual bodies and will slow your growth. The Taoist secrets techniques are meant to be practical, not mechanical. A woman seeks tenderness of feeling in her lovers and will resent a man who is overly compulsive or preoccupied with his mechanical mastery of esoteric love methods. This is exactly why that if a man goes through periods of promiscuity for his entire life, he's going to feel unfulfilled. Now, I'm not against promiscuity. I don't really care what you do in your life, but obviously there has to be some kind of balance, between love and sex, right? Because love is transformative. Lust only goes so far. Lust is okay. It's okay to desire someone, but you also want to have sex with people that you love. That way you can actually truly transform your relationship. This is why, if you're entirely focused on sex, a lot of times, that just brings nothing but ruin with your relationships with women because you're primarily focused on your lust for her, and lust is not infinite, right? Love is infinite. So when you have love for someone, and you don't even necessarily have to be married to this person, but you want to cultivate love with another human being simply because of the fact that will awaken different spiritual parts of you that are much more transformative than continuing just lust, pure lust. Pure lust isn't really going to get you anywhere. And this is exactly why people can't be fuck buddies for 10 years straight. Obviously something's got to give. So, but then again, I'm not for it and I'm not against it either. I'm very indifferent to promiscuity. I'm very indifferent to pretty much everything when it comes to the male and the female interaction. I'm in the middle. It doesn't matter to me because I'm not focused on those things. I follow my higher self and what my higher self tells me to do. But I do value love and I do value lust too. I have a healthy balance between the two. So, that's what works for me. And that's my truth. What works for you and your truth might be different. So another thing that he said in his book is that a relationship fails when the spirit of it is not properly cultivated and you force yourself to eat negative or poisonous sexual energies without transforming them into positive or neutral energies. When the imbalance in energy becomes strong enough, divorce occurs unless the couple finds another way to correct it. Reading pornographic magazines or masturbation are other examples of negative cultivation of your Qing because they stimulate the yang essence in your sperm without balancing it with a real woman's yin sexual energy. So this is exactly why myself and many other people, especially male spiritual YouTubers, we all recommend NoFap. NoFap is very key for a man's spiritual transformation because, and it's not necessarily because porn is good or bad. I don't give a fuck whether it's good or bad, generally for myself. But what I found for myself is that it doesn't benefit me and it actually limits me. So I don't use it anymore, right? But we advocate for NoFap for different reasons. My personal reason that I'm advocating for NoFap is simply because of the fact that, you know, basically when you engage in porn, you are not, like, it's just like what Montauk Chia said, you're not balancing out the amount of energy that you're raising. So what happens is, basically when you build up that much energy, and you have no way to counteract it, you have no way to balance it, that energy has to go somewhere. It's going to explode it out in different ways. And let's say the more that you engage with porn, right? Because porn can become very addictive very fast. You're playing on your sexual energy. So obviously it's going to be very addictive. This is why men, especially, because men connect sexually. Men make a spiritual connection with women sexually. You know, so when it comes to that, right, you're not making a spiritual connection. The only thing that you're doing is you're basically molesting yourself and wasting your own energy, right? And we really have to be cognizant of that, because there's a lot of things out there to play on people's needs because they're not generating it within, to play on people's desires because you're not balancing out within. So that's why there's a huge agenda to get men addicted on porn, to get women addicted on porn, you know, because if you're focusing on that and you're looking for those things to satisfy your needs, then you're not really going to be in control of your sexual energy. This is why I say there's many different agendas that are out there to keep you limited, you know, but obviously you can still balance it out yourself, right? So with porn, you know, if you choose porn over a lover and in your relationship, obviously there's issues there, right? You don't want to have a dependency on these things. And over time, you know, if you're a man on your purpose in general, you really shouldn't have any need for porn in the first place, because it's just going to get in the way of your purpose, right? You have to ask yourself these questions. What's porn really giving you back? You know, because a real woman can give you back, you know, a balance in the energy. She can give you back love, depending on what kind of relationship you two have. A real woman can give you those things back, you know, just off of a sexual connection, not counting who she is, you know, how she fits into your life and whatever. A real woman can give you back much more than porn can. Porn only gives you back a momentary relief, you know, and that's part of the reason why I let go of porn, and that's part of the reason why many others have let go of porn, other than the obvious negative downsides to constantly using it. Casually using it, you know, I still wouldn't even play with fire, because honestly, if you could be using your time and, you know, raising and transmuting your energy, you won't really have a need for porn. So, you know, and that you know, in essence, it's kind of like junk food, right? If you're eating foods that balance out and basically make you feel transformative, make you feel healthy, make you feel better, right? Porn works like junk food. So if you're really using it for yourself, but you're not really, it's not really doing anything for you. So it's going to imbalance parts of you. It's like eating candy all the time. You know, you have to look at it just like another drug, because that's basically what it is. That's how it's been monetized against you and used against you. You know, and this is why, you know, a lot of men have problems with it. So that's why I'll always advocate for NoFap. If you watch my channel back when I was going by Red Reams, you know, I talk in depth about this, because it's a large epidemic, it's a large issue, you know, and it does create an imbalance in the interaction with women, because when it comes to porn, right, if you would rather go to that rather than at least getting out, or at least, you know, putting yourself in a position to actually have options so that you can talk to women and engage with them, you know, if you would rather use porn, then, you know, you're limiting yourself, right? So we really have to be aware of that. That's how you can create an imbalance in essence, you know, and especially if you use it over and over again, right? And so the thing is, when a man ejaculates, right, so the entire body has to help you recover every time you ejaculate, right? We produce millions of sperm a day, millions of sperm a second, right? And the way that we produce it is, you know, natural body functions, and also the environment, what we're putting into our bodies as well. So when you're constantly releasing your seed, your body works a little bit harder to replace it, because obviously you released it and has to keep working. But when you release over and over again, especially the porn, right? When you release over and over again, I'm talking about, like, you know, a lot of men, sometimes they bust gallons a day. You know, we got to be aware of that. So when you're releasing over and over again, and your body's working overtime to replenish that energy, what happens is you begin to degrade your body over time. It's like overtraining in the gym, right? You have to give your body time to rest. You have to give your body time to recuperate. And so your sperm, Your body makes sperm, a mature sperm, within 74 days. That's the completion of a cycle of spermatogenesis, right? So, but if you're releasing your seed 2-3 times a day to porn, right, and you're not cultivating, you're not transmuting that energy, that's why, this is exactly why people will be advocating for NoFap. And yes, there isn't really a scientific foundation because, the body does replace a sperm, but when it comes to the life force energy, that's a different thing. Since science and spirituality in the West is very, very immature, in the understanding, they haven't made that connection yet because the West is still very behind when it comes to making that connection between spirituality and science. But in essence, when you do run out of sperm and your body's working overtime to recover, it's also working overtime to raise up that life force energy. So we really got to be aware of that. And so that's why I recommend Montauk Chia's book, so you can learn how to do that yourself. So he goes on to say, if you run out of sperm, your body automatically makes more. This allows you to be physically ready for your lover at all times. Even if you are alone without a lover and never attempted to procreate, your body produces the sperm and transforms it into creative sexual energy. So you can always transform the stored sexual energy into spirit, your pure awareness, and express it through creative personality at will. So, in fact, Qing is internal energy that nourishes us night and day without ceasing. The process of refinement is partly automatic and partly voluntary. We can either help or hinder the process of transforming our sexual energy into creativity depending on how aware we are of this process. Yet, like breathing, we draw on this source of energy constantly without being aware of it. And then he goes on to say that when these energies are rebalanced through proper lovemaking and meditation, the mind is repatterned and freed of old traumas and habits. Taoist cultivation of one's energies is an extremely powerful tool for self-therapy. So powerful, in fact, that it should be used only by those who have achieved a certain degree of integration in the body, mind, and spirit. Severely imbalanced individuals may release more energy than they can safely deal with, and should see a psychiatrist before attempting to learn the Taoist methods. Now, if you have to see a psychiatrist, that's perfectly fine. That's up to you. But personally, I'm an advocate of you being able to do everything on your own, right? Because I was able to do everything on my own. And so if you're a man, right, and you're learning how to control your sexual energy, the first thing you need to have control over is your body. And you shouldn't be a slave to your body's desires and your body's lower needs. So you shouldn't be a slave to hunger. You shouldn't be a slave to overeating so much, to junk food. Before you can learn how to control your mind, you got to learn how to control your body. So you can't be a slave to your own lust. Lust for food, lust for sex, lust for materials. You have to have control over that. Because if a man is controlled by his stomach, there's no balance. How can you even imagine controlling your mind if you can't control how much you eat? Same thing when it comes to controlling sex, right? If you can't control how much you beat your meat, and bust gallons of nut, then you can never think about controlling your mind because you're not even in control of your dick, right? You're thinking with the wrong head, son. So that's very key. And obviously, I'm not really gonna speak too much on semen retention with sexual partners, right? Do what you want to do when it comes to a sexual partner, because that's not, it doesn't really matter. If you learn how to cultivate your sexual energy, you won't even have to do semen retention all the time, because what happens is you'll train your mind to always raise that sexual energy whether you ejaculate or not. That's the point that you want to get to. See, the thing is with that is that many men haven't unlocked that part of themselves within the body in which that transmutes the life force energy upwards, and instead of releasing it out when they orgasm, right? But when you make that connection, it won't matter whether you're on semen retention or not. Like I said, the semen and life force energy are two different things. So this unique human freedom of utilizing our sexual energy so flexibly does not come without its price. The price is that we spend an estimated 25% to 40% of our key energy taken in through food, air, and sunlight just to manufacture the sperm energy and maintain sexual readiness. So that's what I was saying. The body has to pull from many different places, just to manufacture sperm and infuse it with the life force energy. So when you're constantly spilling your seed to porn, you're not allowing, or your body is working overtime just to recuperate. your body and your spirit are working overtime just to recuperate. And then Montachi goes on to say that, why does the body spend so much of its valuable resources to produce billions of sperm cells and regulate them with an accompanying hormonal system, simply to produce a few children over the course of a lifetime? Nature is not that extravagant. The enormous investment of our bodies in producing this sperm energy is to speed our overall evolution. The more successful a man is in transforming his stored energy into higher creative spiritual energy, the more rapid his evolution. The path of a Taoist cultivation of key energy is simply an attempt to most effectively utilize the natural gifts every man is born with to evolve the maximum possible in a single lifetime. Ordinarily, discharge of the seminal fluid completes the act of love. As soon as the fluid is spent, the body strains to replace it. The faster sperm is used, the more the body is forced to produce. Quite obviously, production of this nutritionally rich and psychically superpotent substance requires an enormous amount of raw materials. The reproductive glands receive these raw materials from the bloodstream. In its turn, the blood withdraws the precious elements from every part of the body, liver, kidney, spleen, etc., including the brain. Every organ pays heavy tribute to the glands that produce the sexual seed. Because a single drop of semen houses such prodigious life energies, frequent loss of fluid depletes the body systems of their most precious nutrients and speeds the inevitable physical decline into old age. Retaining the seed within the body is the first step to reversing the cycle in which the male pays an unnecessarily stiff price for sexual satisfaction. One may conservatively estimate that the average American male ejaculates 5,000 times in his lifetime, equal to roughly 4 gallons of fluid. The Kinsey report provided the following details on the American male's normal frequency of ejaculation. So from puberty will be 3.17 times, 16 to 20, 3.3, 21 to 25, 4.14, 26 to 30, 3.51, 31 to 35, 2.9, 36 to 40, 2.42, 41 to 45, 1.95, 46 to 50, 1.8, 51 to 55, 1.54, 56 to 60, 1.09. As you can see, the average ejaculation per week drops as you get older. So more recent studies suggest that it is likely that the vital seed is more frequently lost now than in the time of Kinsey's studies, because the overall level of sexual stimulation and activity is presently higher. Why? Because of the effects of the sexual revolution. So porn, promiscuity is seen as something that is more acceptable in society now. So men are allowed to be a little bit more open with their intentions with women, right? And same with women with their intentions with men. So, and then availability of contraceptives, so you don't have to worry about knocking somebody up. And attitudes towards sex and television, obviously in the West, is heavily geared towards sex. Everything is geared towards sex in the West. In media and television, everything. And film and magazines has been particularly strong in encouraging premarital sex among youth. But to avoid any statistical inflation, let us use the 5,000 ejaculations per lifetime made by Kinsey in the 50s. To calculate the flood of fluid loss, normally lost, 5,000 ejaculations times 3 fluid will equal 15,000 cc. This is 15 liters, or roughly 4 gallons of fluid. The semen spent in an average ejaculation has a volume of 2 to 5 cubic centimeters. These drops contain 200 million to 500 million individual sperm cells. So, and that's alarming, right? And I think I've also heard that, at least in Chinese philosophy, they say that the semen, 1 drop of semen is equivalent to like a pint of blood or something. So that's a lot of blood and nutrients that you're losing with your body trying to recover so much every time you spill your seed. So this is why it's very, very important to learn how to actually transmute that life energy. And it's very important to learn about how to actually, just in general as a man, right? Because at least in the West, you are very uneducated about your body, because the Western man is very uneducated simply because of the fact that he lives inside of an uneducated country in an uneducated age spiritually, right? So in this new age where people are just coming into consciousness, and remembering where we were, thousands of years ago, catching up with that knowledge, remembering that knowledge. See, we have to understand. First, we need to understand our bodies before we begin to understand how our minds work, before we begin to understand how our spirit works, right? And we have to make that mind, body, and spirit connection. So part of understanding that is understanding just how much you don't know when it comes to mind, body, and spirit, right? A part of questioning science, right? A part of science in general, you have to be willing to question, okay, is the field of research as accurate or not? If it's not, I need to investigate it further. Personally, you shouldn't be taking what other people say without doing your own research in the first place, right? Just because I make a video and it's a little bit convincing doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and look into it yourself. Just because Mantai Chia writes a book with a lot of research done on semen retention doesn't mean you shouldn't go and do your own research. You want to gather information from all different sources, including yourself, right? Your experience and your wisdom is the best way to go. So my experience and my wisdom has led me to this point right here, where I'm talking about why semen retention is very important, and why NoFap is very important on a spiritual level. That's where my spirit has led me. Your spirit might lead you to say the exact opposite of what I'm saying. It all doesn't matter because it's all true. It just depends on, okay, where's your spirit leading you? Where's your higher self leading you? That's the nature of everything, right? And so essentially, you want to understand just how much your body is working overtime to create these fluids, especially if you're engaging in porn, right? Now, when you're engaging with a woman, it's a little bit different because obviously you have her to balance out your energies, especially if you've transmuted your energy. If you transmuted your energy, it really won't matter how much you're having sex with her. But when it comes to porn, you can't balance out that energy loss. Not unless you're hyper vigilant on yourself. You can't balance out that energy loss. It's not worth it, and it's also not worth what it does to your mind, what it does to your brain, what it does to your body, and your interactions, right? So it's very important to practice NoFap and semen retention, especially if you're a young man, right? If you're a young man, teenage years, 20s, start it now. Even if you're older, if you feel like you might have damaged your body too much, don't worry, because you can always make that change at any point in time, and it'll revitalize you. I guarantee you it'll revitalize you. The power of the human body is very miraculous, and like I said, there's a lot that we don't even know or that we're just remembering, at least in the West, right? The West is just now catching up simply because the West lost its knowledge, when newer people came into the West. So we have to really understand, coming out of an age of ignorance, into an age of spiritual knowledge, we have to understand how these things function on a physical level, on a mental level, on a spiritual level, especially as men. And for women, women can also do these exercises as well. Basically, you can do all the exercises in Mantai Chia's book, and basically when it comes to raising up that sexual energy, you want to raise up that yang energy from the ovaries. The ovaries are the female representation of the testicles. So, and you can raise up that energy just as easy as a man can raise up his energy. So it's very important that a woman opens up those parts of herself as well, for spiritual transformation. So definitely get Mantai Chia's book. I'll be making more videos on this in the future if people need more clarification, right? But that's how sexual alchemy and semen retention works hand in hand. That's a full understanding, a full occult understanding, and obviously this is still a larger topic, it's open for discussion, and it's always constantly transforming because we as spiritual and physical beings are transforming, evolving. Everything here evolves. So, and the same thing comes to our mindsets. So like I said, focus on your experience, focus on your own understanding. Don't just take what I say, read the books and see what your own experience gives you. Find exactly what your own path is, where it leads you, and where your higher self is leading you, where God is leading you. Find that for yourself. That's really what matters. I'm not advocating for anybody to follow everything that I say. I know the nature of a human experience is just that of polarity. We're created separate. At least in experiencing in this matrix, we're under the illusion of separation. So obviously there's going to be polarity, there's going to be differences, but in understanding the truth that we have, on an individual level, we can understand ourselves better. So that's the video. That's the occult and the esoteric understanding of semen retention, and also I guess NoFap too, since I talked about NoFap as well in this video, right? So definitely pick up Mantai Chia's book. Definitely look into this more. You know, I'll be talking about this more in the future, not as often as I did, obviously, when Semen Retention was the main focus on this channel. But if I really feel like making another video on it, I will. You know, because obviously sexual alchemy is still a very important part, you know, of the spiritual journey, and so that's something that we need to be cognizant, we need to be aware of, because the sexual energy, you know, that's the key to our creativity, that's the key to our transformation. You know, it's one of the many keys, and so obviously we want to have control over this, and we want to have, you know, a full understanding of this. You know, it's all connects, it all contributes to your evolution and your enlightenment over time. You know, so that's the video. I hope it inspired you guys. I hope it motivated you guys. Like, comment, and subscribe, and turn notifications on if you don't have them on, so you get notified when I post fire content like this. I wish you all luck in your journey, and peace.